actually have two different sets of notes. One is really an article that you will be putting into your notes that is entitled something like "When I'm Asked to Violate My Conscience" or something like that. Did everybody pick that up? It looks like this. Okay, we're not going to read that or refer to that in class, but that's for your notebook. We didn't get any holes in that, though, did we? Is that the holes are normally free. We don't charge extra for the holes, so you can punch them yourself. But maybe if Antoinette, is she around? Maybe, Pastor David, maybe at break time we can have the punch down here, and they can all punch their notes. I know what that's like. You got a great notebook, and you got all the holes in there, and now I got this loose piece that's going to fly everywhere every time I open my notebook. All right, I've been there, done that many, many times. All right, today we're looking at life management, still talking about our workaday life, and today is lesson 7, and we're looking at a lesson entitled "The Only Policy." You can probably already halfway guess what we're going to be talking about, the only policy. But in a recent survey of top executives of large companies, revealed that there was a common concern in the workplace. And of course, when you own a business, you look at things a lot differently than when you are participating in a business as an employee. But employers were most annoyed, number one here on your notes, at the dishonesty and lack of integrity of many of the employees. Just a minute, I'll wait till. They were concerned about the dishonesty and lack of integrity of so many of their employees. Of course, it doesn't mean that they don't have issues themselves, but when you're in business and when you're trying to get business done and you have to use employees to do this, they're concerned about. The second most prevalent complaint was that of employee goof-offs and irresponsibility. Just seemed like, they come to work, but they're not really interested in working, and they don't seem to take responsibility for areas that they are given a charge over. Some of the other major complaints included absenteeism and lateness. That is, they don't show up at all, or if they do, they show up late. And it seems to be quite prevalent, and there doesn't seem to be any real good reason for it. Another one is not following instructions or ignoring company policy. Well, they don't agree with company policy, so they don't do it. Or whining and complaining about the job or the company, or lack of commitment, dedication, and concern, laziness, lack of motivation, enthusiasm, overall bad attitudes when asked to do things. What right do you have to do things? We had a gardener situation like that. Asked him to do something, and he says, "Well, I'm not your slave." Well, wait a minute, I pay you. I pay you for what you do. I think you are my slave for one day. I wasn't asking him to do anything except just move some things. I guess he thought if it wasn't moving grass, then it wasn't part of his area of responsibility. But I mean, he didn't live long in that job, I'll have to tell you. You're not my boss. Wait a minute, I think I pay you, don't I? Don't I pay you? Yeah, I do pay you. Well, it's not hard for most of us to see that almost all of these things deal with the area of honesty and personal integrity. And it has been said that honesty is the best policy. Have you ever heard that statement? But for the Christian, honesty is the only policy. If it's the best policy, it kind of gives the feeling that maybe you have a choice. And you do. But as a Christian, you don't have a choice because you are under the lordship of Jesus Christ. And so really for the Christian, honesty and integrity, these are the only policy. Letter B, honesty should be the only policy for the Christian worker. What does that mean? Well, number one, honesty implies a refusal to lie, steal, defraud, or deceive under any circumstances. How many know no matter where you work, these are challenges that will come upon you in relationship to that business. I have applied for jobs that I ended up not taking because they taught me how to lie. They taught me how to deceive in relationship to a product. Tell the people this or tell the people that. I already told you the story about my wife who the guy told her, well, when you talk to people, tell them that I made these things. But she found out later he didn't make these things. But tell them I do. Well, honesty implies a refusal to lie, to steal, to defraud, or deceive under any circumstances. Number two, true honesty is not situational. You can put that Y in there. True honesty is not situational. If your sense of honesty adjusts when the truth may not be to your advantage, then you're not really an honest person. Somebody say, well, are you honest? You say, most of the time. Well, yeah. As long as I'm not put in a position where I disagree with things, or as long as I'm not in a position, then I am honest most of the time. Well, there's no such thing like that. It's not situational. Most people are honest until they're faced with a situation tempting them enough to be dishonest. And so we all live our lives pretty much that way, but a dishonest person is somebody who will, at various seasons, justify dishonesty by certain situation. Well, in this situation, I just felt like I needed to lie. And most of the time, it has to do with some kind of a thing within us. And so we have to be careful about this. Number 3, there are no degrees of honesty. An honest merchant is one who puts up a sign that says going out of business and then goes out of business. In the States, we have these people that have these go out of business sale. We're going out of business. We have a sale, going out of business sale. And we put these big banners up on their buildings so people will come in and buy all their product. And then they don't go out of business. They have another going out of business sale. And come to find out, that was the name of their company, going out of business sale. So, no, I'm just teasing. But people do these things to draw somebody in, and then they don't necessarily follow through on it. And so there are no degrees of honesty. You're either honest or you're not. So we're dealing with honesty. Letter C, we're dealing with integrity. Integrity should be the mark of the Christian in the workplace. Now, the word integrity implies such uprightness that one is incorruptible or incapable of being false to a trust or a responsibility or to one's own standards. You have certain standards, and that is what you live by, and it affects pretty much everything that you do. Number 2, integrity is a steadfast adherence to a strict moral or ethical code. So you have ethics. You have certain code of living and code of life that applies to you, and you walk in that. Now, in some ways, there's a negative side to this. If you have no ethics and you're faithful to it, then you have a certain type of integrity because you are what you claim. I never claimed to be anything except a rascal, and I am. So I am what I confess. But obviously, it's not used that way in our culture. But the word actually means that. Number 3, integrity is the quality or condition of being whole or undivided. A person of integrity is everywhere the same person, and that's why sometimes, when people see you on church on Sunday, you should look the same as you do on Monday. You should look the same, not dress-wise, but you should look the same at all times. You are who you are. And you hear people comment on people like that sometimes. Well, what you see is what you get, or wherever they are, they're exactly the same. You can kind of count on them that way. One time, when I was the dean of students at Portland Bible College, Pastor Ginny was also a student there, and of course, the students were in fear of me, of course, because I was, being the dean of students, I was the one who administered any discipline for any wrong behavior. And when you get 300 teenagers together and 21, 22-year-olds, you can have some misbehavior, I'm telling you. And they're a little bit, there's a little reverential awe there because I have the power to kick them out of school, for one thing. And so now Pastor Jenny is going to school, and so somebody asked her in the dorm, she said, what's it like to live with him? What's it like to live with him? And her answer, she told me later, was, well, whatever he says and whatever he tells us to do, he will do himself. And so it's not, he's one thing at home and then he's something else here and he's something else here. You can pretty well depend. And that's a great compliment in many ways, is that, you're not something in the pulpit, you're not something in the classroom, you're not something in this scene, and then you go over here and you're something different. And that's a person of integrity. And it's what you being what you claim to be in front of others. So that's what God wants us to be when it comes to our business life. And again, we're highlighting the fact that so many people compartmentalize their life they have their charity life and they have their Christian life where they go to church and they are involved in teaching Sunday school, and then they'll go out and cheat somebody in a week. And they'll come back and teach another class and teach about Daniel and how important it was for him to stand up against the systems of the day. And then they'll go back and cheat. And then they'll come back on another Sunday and they'll teach the story of David and how, and you're not the same. And we have to understand that we teach more through our life than we do through our words. Now, part of our problems come from Roman numeral 2 here, problems in education. Now, I'm not sure really about the educational systems here in South Africa, but if they have been influenced at all by Europe or America or some of the other places of the world, Canada would be a great one too, they will probably start, if they don't have them now, they will have some of these problems. And the area of education, some of the problem lies with the educational systems of the modern day world. Many school systems are adopting what they call values clarification principles that tend to put into question all moral absolutes. What they'll do is they'll take students in a classroom and they'll put them in a scenario. Is it ever wrong to, or is it ever right, to lie? Is it ever proper to kill somebody? Is it ever proper to do this and do that? And they'll create some strange scenario that will put every ethical principle you ever believed into question. Well, your airplane has crashed and you're starving and there's one person who's dying and they could save everybody if you just killed them and ate them. And they got all these scenarios. And what it does, in essence, is it puts into question anything that's absolute. The world does not like absolutes. They don't like to hear that this is wrong all the time. Well, is there ever a case where it wouldn't be, like sex outside of marriage? Or would there ever be a case where this or that or the other thing, or stealing on the job? Well, here's and they'll use a story of somebody in the Middle Ages who was executed because he stole a loaf of bread to feed his starving family or something. And take extreme examples, and then what they're trying to do is that, there is no such thing as an absolute. Now, that's happening I don't know if that's happening in your schools, but that's happening in our schools a lot. And it didn't just start recently. It started 20 years ago in our schools where kids are coming out of school with no moral bearings whatsoever, and it's just like there's nothing absolute out there. Letter A, all ethical behavior is seen as situational, and exercises are sometimes aimed at creating scenarios where it is appropriate to lie, to cheat, or to steal. Well, obviously, if you are given an extreme scenario, it's like, do I need to get baptized? What about the thief on the cross? Well, you're not on a cross. You're not the thief. Jesus is not hanging next to you, and the Romans haven't nailed you to anything, and so we bring an example that is so far from reality, probably never happened to us in our entire life, and put a big question mark. Has God really said? That's what the devil does. Has God said? And then we take a quantum leap and start applying this to our day-to-day behavior. And we put a question mark on just our very nature of honesty, morality, and so forth. Letter B, students involved in business administration, and these are people that are involved in business courses, fully accept the notion that they will have to engage in behavior that is less than ethical. And many students, at least in our universities today, and in an interview with students in a prominent business institution, they revealed that over 50% of the students accepted as fact that they would have to engage in activities that were less than ethical if they were to succeed in the field of choice. Well, if you go into this field, that's just part of the territory. If you're going to succeed in this business, then you've got to do a little bit of this, and you've got to do a little bit of that. That's just the way it is. And unfortunately, Christian young people can actually buy into that line that's the way we have to live. That's just, we're in the world, and we just got to be smart about it, and we just got to play the world's game. Well, obviously that undermines our Christian witness and our Christian testimony. Let us see, there seems to be a great contradiction where on the one hand, employers are looking for people of honesty and integrity, and yet at the same time, they are themselves being trained in and utilized and also utilize questionable business practices. So on the one hand, When we look for employees, we want people of honesty. We want people of integrity. But as employers, are you the same? Are you people of honesty and integrity, or do you use questionable practices? You can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, we want people that are honest, but don't judge us by those standards, please. In the United States, we have that problem because we have the Senate and the House of Representatives, and they make the laws for the people. But you know what? They have their own set of laws. There are certain laws that apply to everybody else, but they don't apply to them. And when they make the law, they do it that way. Well, that we don't go by that. We don't use that same standard on us. Well, that doesn't create a whole lot of respect for people that are in that. I think that's one good way to ensure that you have better laws is that everybody has to obey them, whether the ones that make them and the rest of us. So one problem we have is a problem in education. The other one problem that we have in this whole area of honesty and morality has to do in the area of the workplace itself and pressures that we experience in the workplace. So in addition to the educational issues, there's pressure in the workplace to compromise standards of honesty and integrity. I don't know how many of you have been in a workplace and a work environment where there was a great pressure on you to be, David, I think you're just a little bit behind here, great pressure on us to do something wrong, do something illegal, do something in that area. Letter A, there are pressures on the management level. Pressures on the management level. The boss will actually ask you to do things. Again, I shared the testimony of my wife before. But in a group of 800 managers surveyed anonymously, most felt pressure to compromise personal ethics for company goals. Okay, these are our company goals out here. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And they felt a pressure to compromise their personal standards in order to reach or to do something to reach those goals. Other studies have taken place that reveal the same thing. Letter B, there is a pressure then not just on management level, but there's also a pressure on peer level. And we find these kind of pressures all the time. And again, I haven't had a lot of work experience here in South Africa. I don't have a work permit, so I can't. But I just have to lay around all day because I have no work permit. But there's pressure to 6 things here. Slow down work. Hey, don't work so fast. Has anybody ever told you? Don't work so fast. You're making us all look bad. We got this thing figured out. We can just kind of work at this pace, and that's good. That's good for everybody. You're coming in here. Way slow down there, buddy. Where do you think you're going? And they want to pull you back a little bit to their levels because we don't want to all have to work that fast, that hard. So come back to where we're at. 2, there's pressure to participate in cover-up of employee theft. It's amazing how much employee theft takes place. People work in department stores. People work in other supply stores. In America, we have these things called garage sales. And where if you don't, you have some things you want to get rid of, you just put them in your garage or put them on your lawn, yard sales or driveway sales or whatever, backyard sales. You stick all your stuff outside that you don't want, put a price on it, and people come around and buy it. I've gone to, that used to be one of the things that Joanne and I did on Saturdays a lot, was just to go around and see what we could get. And actually, a lot of the things we brought here, we got at garage sales. So a lot of times it's good stuff, but you go into some garage sales and it's like it's an electrical supply warehouse. There's all kinds of switches and all kinds of electrical fixtures and this and that and the other thing, or hardware of all kinds. And you think you're in a store. Then you find out, well, where does this guy work? He works at a hardware store. He works at an electrical supply store. Just a little bit, bring it in your pockets every time you come home. Just bring a little bit more, bring a little bit more. Has ever seen that movie Shawshank Redemption, where he took the whole wall out little by little in a pocket, and dropped it down his pant leg, and before you know it, the whole wall was gone, but it was all done one pocketful at a time. And sometimes people do that, and employees know about it. And there's a pressure to not say anything, not to do anything about it, but just let it go. Or there's pressure to misrepresent a product. Tell the people this about it, or tell the people that about it, and it's not true because of what you saw before and have seen behind the scenes. You go behind the scenes. Oh, wait a minute! I see now that isn't really true. Or to pad bills and magnify expenses. I'll tell you a little bit more about my own personal job experience. I think it's in this today that we're going to be doing that. Maybe it's next time. But I had a job that I lost this way too, in relationship to, because we'd do a certain amount of work. I was involved as an auto mechanic, and the guy would bring in his car, and we'd do a certain amount of work. Sometimes it was a very simple fix. Sometimes the car didn't. I mean, it seemed like to the customer, this must be serious because the car won't do anything. But when they brought it in, it's a very simple fix. I mean, it didn't really cost any time, and it didn't really cost any money. It's like a loose wire, and all you had to do was tighten it. Well, and then they charge, as if it was something huge or something big and so forth. And you have to ask yourself, is that padding the bill? I had one employer that I worked for who would add parts that we put in that we didn't put in. That's why one of the things that I do sometimes when I go to auto mechanics is I say, if you have to replace anything, I want the old part when you're done with it. Because I want to see that they actually replace something. Unless they have a whole stockpile of old parts and they just give me one. Here, this is yours. That can't fit on my car. But there's this pressure to pad bills, magnify expenses, or number 5, enhance benefits and expense accounts. I mean, do you have these on your sheet there? Yeah. Sometimes we ourselves, you have an expense account. You have certain money that you can use, and there's not an accurate reporting. There's a padding of it to make it look bigger than what it is, so you can get reimbursed in another way. Or utilize company assets for your personal enjoyment. They give you a car. It's supposed to be used for business purposes, but you go on vacations, you do other things, and all kinds of things with that vehicle. Let's take the company car. I don't want to put any miles on my car, and that kind of an attitude. But it wasn't given with that privilege. Now, sometimes they may say use it however you want to. That's fine. But sometimes we use company assets for our own personal enjoyment. These are issues, peer-level pressure to do these things. Jerry White, in his book, Honesty, Morality, and Conscience, states, the influence of people on people is a powerful force affecting everyone. A reasoning mind can become powerless in the face of this pressure. Even the most committed individualist conforms in some ways to the lifestyle of others. This influence is stronger than any of us would like to admit. We want to act individually and independently, but in reality we conform much of our life to those around us. The pressure we face from others is one of the greatest barriers to making proper ethical decisions. So we've got people around us all the time that are putting pressure on us, and of course this creates a problem. Well, what does the Bible say? Now, again, all of these verses speak to the issue of honesty and integrity, and what I'll be quoting most of the time is from the New Living Translation, because I find it helps us to put it into real life a lot of times. But here's some passages. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 19 to 20. You must never twist justice or show partiality. Never accept a bribe, for bribes blind the eyes of the wise and corrupt the decisions of the godly. Let true justice prevail so that you may live and occupy the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And I think what this verse teaches us is that you never have to compromise justice to have success. You don't have to compromise justice to have success. All right, don't accept a bribe. Don't twist justice. Don't do these things. Because God has a land that He wants to give you, and He wants you to occupy. And you don't have to do these things. You can let true justice prevail. Deuteronomy 25, verse 13 to 16. You must use accurate scales when you weigh out merchandise. And you must use full and honest measures. Yes, use honest weights and measures so that you will enjoy a long life in the land the Lord your God is giving you. It tells you here that God wants to bless you, and one of the ways He wants to bless you is that He wants you to be honest. You want the blessing of man or the blessing of the Lord? It goes on to say, those who cheat with dishonest weights and measures are detestable to the Lord your God. I mean, He just doesn't like it. He looks down. He hates dishonest measures. And so He's talking about their business life. He's not talking about their going to church on Sundays. He's talking about how they do business. And He says, hey, I want to bless you guys. I want you to enjoy a long life in the land. But you're not going to do it very well if you have my hatred on your practices. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 11. The Lord demands fairness in every business deal. He sets the standard. Now, there's a scripture for you. The Lord demands fairness in every business deal. How many wish they had a few more deals like that? He sets the standard. And again, you don't have to apologize for God's high standards. God can take care of himself. He's asking us to be his children and trust him in this. Proverbs 19, verse 1. It is better to be poor and honest than to be a fool and dishonest. It's better to be poor and sleep well at night than to be a fool and dishonest. So being honest is better than being rich. Proverbs 20, verse 7. And that's the thing. Lots of times we're drawn by this carrot of riches, because I know I can make a little bit more. I know if I pad the bill, I'm going to get a little bit more. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that. And money becomes the object of things. And God says, hey, your goal in life is not to be rich. Your goal is to be my son and a good representative of me wherever you go. Proverbs 20, verse 7. The godly walk with integrity. Blessed are their children after them. The godly walk in integrity. Blessed are their children after them. There's a linkage here between our own integrity and what we pass on to our children. And one of the best things you can do for your children is to be a person of integrity. What kind of heritage are you going to pass down to your children? Because I'll tell you what, if you're dishonest, they'll be more dishonest. If you're righteous, they'll be more righteous. They're going to take it to the next level, whatever you've given them as an example. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 10. The Lord despises double standards of every kind. That's pretty blunt. So we're to treat everyone with the same care in how we handle people. No double standards here, no prejudice here. Proverbs 20, verse 17. Food gained by fraud tastes sweet to a man, but he ends up with a mouthful of gravel. Food gained by fraud tastes sweet to a man. And that basically is saying dishonesty may seem to gain one an advantage in the short term. It may seem to gain you an advantage. It may taste sweet at the time because we were able to buy this or we were able to get this or whatever. But it says he will end up with a mouthful of gravel. In the long term, dishonesty will be his undoing, and he's going to end up with nothing. Because it will all come to the light at some point in time. Thank you, Jacques. Good to see you this morning. Acts chapter 24, verse 16. Paul said this, I always try to maintain a clear conscience before God and everyone else. Having a clear conscience is a good thing. Amen? 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 to 2. Because we have these promises, dear friends, let us cleanse ourselves from everything that can defile our body or spirit, and let us work toward complete purity because we fear God. Please open your hearts to us. We have not done wrong to anyone. We have not led anyone astray, and we have not taken advantage of anyone. That'd be a great testimony to have. Be able to say, hey, we haven't done anyone wrong. We haven't led anybody astray, and we haven't taken advantage of anyone. Paul was able to say that. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 19 to 21 says, He was appointed by the churches to accompany us as we take the offering to Jerusalem, a service that glorifies the Lord and shows our eagerness to help. By traveling together, we will guard against any suspicion, for we are anxious that no one should find fault with the way we are handling this generous gift. We are careful to be honorable before the Lord, and we want everyone else to know we are honorable. Paul was taking a large sum of money from the various churches. He was taking offerings from the various churches, and he was going to present it to Jerusalem, who was struggling in there as a church. And he had an accountant that traveled with him. He had several other people. A representative from each church would go with him with their offering. And he says, listen, we're just going to do this so that we're totally above suspicion. And we don't not only want God's favor, we want your favor. We don't want anybody to feel like we're misusing this money that's been put in our hands. And so he was very, very careful in those areas. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. Pray for us, for our conscience is clear, and we want to live honorably in everything we do. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 12. Be careful how you live among your unbelieving neighbors. Even if they accuse you of wrongdoing, they will see your honorable behavior, and they will believe and give honor to God when He comes to judge the world. So it's a matter of witness. It's a matter of testimony. Our unbelieving neighbors are watching us. Have you ever heard anybody say, well, so-and-so does it, and they name the name of a Christian? Well, so-and-so does it. I had an experience like that one time when it came to certain issues of breaking the law. And the teenagers wanted me to break the law, and I refused to do it. Well, so-and-so does it. You know, they'll name somebody that they think I respect. In that case, it happened to be an elder of the church. You know, well, so-and-so does it. And I have asked myself the question from that: is anybody using my name to justify sin? Well, Brother Bill does it, so we can do it. You know, whatever. Well, that's a challenge we all have to face. But Paul says, hey, how are you living among your unbelieving neighbors? I know around Christians we're all just really good, but how are you when it comes to your unbelieving neighbors? All right, Roman numeral 5, bringing honesty into the workplace. First of all, letter A commitment to just weights. God said He doesn't like unjust weights. He doesn't like unjust scales. Now, think about it for a minute in the workplace, and we'll just get a little response here from you. What are some of the things that you feel would be an example of unjust weights in the marketplace? An unjust weight, a just weight is giving full amount in exchange for full payment. What are some of the things that you see in the workplace that could be considered an unjust weight? That is, are you giving the full amount for full payment? What would be some of the things that you would see potential in the workplace for being an unjust weight? Anybody think about that, or is it too early in the morning? Yes. Okay, so you charge an excessive amount of money, but the wages that you're paying for people that are working for you are very, very nowhere near what is actually being charged for the product. Okay. What else? Okay, the service is not up to standard for what you're being charged. You're being charged one kind of service, and yet you're not giving it. You're advertising this is what you're going to do, and that's how you get people online, but then you don't actually provide that service. Okay? Yes, back here. Okay, so they make claims about who might have been involved in working, but they didn't actually work for that, and so they collect more than what they should have taken. Yes. Okay. 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 So you charge a different price for the same procedure for a different client. In other words, we know they have more money, so we charge them more money, even though over here we do exactly the same thing, but we charge over here. All right, those are good examples. Here's some more. Number one is giving full quality. Let's go back to the notes there. A just weight is giving a full amount in exchange for full payment. This implies, number one, giving full quality for what is paid for. Okay, if you pay for a certain quality, that's the quality you should get. I was working for a guy in the auto world, and there are different kinds of parts in the auto world. There are original equipment parts, which are generally very expensive, and then there are aftermarket replacement parts, which are often quite a bit cheaper. And sometimes there's really no difference in quality, but more often than not, there is a difference in quality, and the original equipment parts were made when the car was made, and they fit better, they work better, and they function better, they last longer, tend to. It's not always the case, but it is in most cases. And generally, when because of the difference in price, some people prefer to have aftermarket parts because a lot of times they work fine. But the business I was working in, we used aftermarket parts, but he charged for original equipment parts. And so he would use the original equipment part numbers, and he would charge that. And as far as the people knew, they were paying for original equipment parts. And so that's another example of giving full quality for what is paid for. Now, if a customer says, use aftermarket parts, I don't mind, I appreciate the savings. That's great. But if they think they're getting one thing, but they're actually getting something else, it's not a just weight or measure. This also implies, number 2, giving exactly what is being advertised. It was mentioned here. Okay, we advertise this, and this is what you get. But there's always a lot of switching around sometimes of things, and sometimes you don't get exactly what's advertised. And a good example was of service. You know, you're given a service contract. This is what we'll do for you. This is what we'll provide for you. And once they got your money, you don't get the service, and you don't get that provided. And number 3, providing a service that is in keeping with what is promised. That's the same as what we're talking about here. Number 3, providing a service that's in keeping with what is promised. Number 4, setting a fair price for services rendered. A fair price. My dad had an interesting opportunity here because my dad was an unusual guy. He didn't have a lot of natural training, but when it came to electronics, when it came to those kind of things, he could just see things in another world. And people who were involved in some companies sometimes who were real high up. In fact, there were companies who would manufacture things, but they couldn't troubleshoot them when they had a problem. And he would help them figure out the problem. And yet they were, more educated in engineering and those types of things. He didn't really have much education. One such example was Tektronix, which is a large high-tech manufacturing company that created a lot of instruments for measuring various things and so forth. And one of the things that they developed way back when was called an ultrasonic cleaner, where they would clean small parts with sound waves, and they use that probably a lot now, so that like a watch band, that's a small part, but it was more for high-end stuff. And they would just put it in this tank, and sound waves would go through it. And they use the same process really for breaking up kidney stones and things like that now, but it was the same basic process. So they manufacture these things, but then once in a while there would be problems with them, and they were quite expensive because it was brand new technology at the time, and so it was very expensive equipment. And so they manufactured them, but when they'd have problems with them, they couldn't figure out some of the issues. And so I don't know how they found out about my dad, but they called him to find out. So it turns out he can fix them. Okay, so they bring these things to him. He could charge anything in the world that he wanted to. Number one, these are expensive pieces of equipment, and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he comes in there and just does a couple of things, and it works great. He could have charged $10,000. He could have charged, and they would have been happy. We just saved a $100,000 piece of equipment. He just charges $10,000 to fix it. All right, so we saved that. He would just charge them basically what he'd charge anybody for an hour's worth of labor, And so okay, $100, okay, that's what we'll charge or whatever. And it was probably less than that. And people say, "You're crazy." He said, "Well, it didn't take me any time." Now, I think he probably could have justified charging a little more because we live in a world where you're paid for knowledge. But nonetheless, that's just his attitude. Yeah, it didn't take me that much time, and so he helped them figure out what they were supposed to do with it later on. But that whole idea of a fair price, and I think a fair price probably for that would have been a lot more. It still would have been a fair price. But nonetheless, I'm just telling you, his spirit was, I'm not going to, just gouge people just for the sake of gouging them. And then number 5, this is a good one for employees, giving a full day's work for a full day's pay. Full day's work for a full day's pay. Some people come in late, they take long breaks, take a long lunch, take a long afternoon tea, then they leave early to make up for it. And when they are working, they're barely working. And I look at some of these guys that are on the road sometimes, just replacing the rocks and putting them back on the side, and then putting them back on the street, and then putting them back on the side. These rocks to keep you from driving on it. And, I reminded of the story that a pastor from Trinidad was telling me as we were going through. He said, we have a lot of visitors that come to Trinidad, and he says they had this visitor come, and they were showing him some sights and taking him to the attractions, and he wasn't impressed with anything. He had his camera, never took his camera out. He just was going around the city and never took his camera out. They were going to explain all that, never took his camera out. Finally, they were driving down the street, and he pulls out his camera. "Quick, stop the car, stop the car, stop the car." And he starts clicking. And he said, "What is it?" He says, those are the most lifelike statues I've ever seen. He says, "Well, those are our construction workers. What are you talking about?" It says men working. That's why they put a sign up so you know what they're doing. Those are the most lifelike statues I've ever seen. They just move so slowly you can't tell that they're really not statues. So anyway, Full day's work for a full day's pay. Bad joke, I know. In a magazine called Industry Week, so one man made this statement. He said 75% of Americans say they can be significantly more effective on their jobs. If you ask them, could you be more effective on your job than you are? 75% say yes. I could probably do better. I could probably improve a little bit. Well, that comes into this whole just weights thing. Secondly, a commitment to just weights. Secondly, a commitment to total honesty. A commitment to total honesty. Total honesty means that to the best of our knowledge, we are speaking the truth to everyone, including our employer, our co-workers, our employees, and our customers. This implies, number one, accurately reporting our use of time. All right, we turn in a time card. This reflects what I did. Number two, accurately representing ourselves and our abilities in our resumes and job applications. I mean, you get some of these job applications, resumes filled out, and honestly, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, To Catch a Thief, but this guy lied a lot about his abilities and skills and so forth, and he's doing, involved in hospital work and so forth. You just wonder how many others are involved in hospital work who lied about their stuff. But accurately representing yourself. When you inaccurately represent yourself, you're not really trusting God for that job. You're saying to God, God, if I tell them who I really am, they'll never hire me. Well, let's either change who you are, or let's find another job, or trust God that He can give you a job that you don't have to lie to get. Number three, accurately estimating the length of and costs of jobs. Accurately estimating the length and cost of jobs. And some people, they just want the job so bad, they'll just throw a number out there. There's nothing that's tied to. And then when they get down to the end, they'll try to get more out of people or do whatever. And they'll tell somebody that this job will take 2 weeks. Have you ever heard that one before? How long will it take to get this kitchen into my house? What is the date? Oh, we'll have it in there by the end of the month. They just didn't say. I forgot to ask which month and which year. Trying to be a little bit more accurate in that area. Number four, accurately reporting business expenses. This is a matter of honesty, integrity. And then number five, not promising delivery or performance that is impossible. Oh yeah, we can do that. We'll do that. Yeah, we can have that by. But you do that so that you can get the work. If you told them what was really true, they wouldn't hire you. And so there's a tendency to want to do that. Hopefully, if you establish a reputation for integrity, that integrity will get you a lot. I'd rather hire somebody who was honest with me and said, this is the date that it will be there, and it will be there at that date. This guy says he'll have it earlier, but his reputation is he's not going to meet his deadlines. This guy has a reputation for meeting his deadlines. I'd rather fix that guy in than another person who said, well, this is when I'll do it. If that was the basic difference between their two situations. So we're talking about honesty in the workplace and what that implies. Roman numeral 6, things that will help us. There are several things that will help us to keep honesty as the only policy. Letter A, an attitude of serving. Attitude of serving. Let's just constantly remember we are servants of God, and we are servants of the Lord, and that translates into the fact that we are servants to our employers, we are servants to our employees, we are servants to our customers. And when we have that attitude that, listen, I am here to serve mankind, I'm here to have the ministry of Jesus, to serve, to give my life as a ransom for many, then everybody that I associate with, I am their slave. I am their servant. I'm a servant to my employers. I'm a servant to my employees. I'm a servant to my customers. I'm a servant to the world. So as long as we keep that attitude in place, I think we can avoid some problems. Letter B, a sense of accountability. If we have a sense, and we understand this in our work, and we'll talk about this more next time, but we know that God's going to hold us accountable even if our boss doesn't. That even if they don't know what we're doing, God does, and there will be a accountability that will come into our situation. So we live in an accountability to God, not to man. Letter C, a reasonable profit. If we understand that God is in full support of us making a reasonable profit, we don't have to feel guilty when we build a reasonable profit into what we do. I mean, that's why you're in business. And if you've been in business for any length of time, you have to make that profit margin enough so that, because a lot of jobs you lose money on. If you've ever been in business, you do lose money on certain jobs. I used to be in the painting business also, and some jobs we just didn't estimate very well. We got into some things we didn't know we were going to get into, and it actually cost us a lot more than we thought. Well, if you're going to make a living at that, some jobs you're going to have to make more, because some jobs you will make less. And so in your overall scheme of things, you have to set your prices at a realm where, you can accommodate that. So that's okay. One of your purposes in being in business is staying in business. How many know that? And so you can't stay in business if you lose money on every job. And so you do have to build profit in, and God understands that. And when He even used the examples of investors in the Bible, He understands this. So it's okay. It's good. It's not being dishonest or having a lack of integrity to build a reasonable profit into what you're doing and what you're offering. And I would say this too. I'm really tired of Christians always feeling like they've got to get a discount from their friends. I don't like to use friends for business things simply because I would rather have friends than a job done or a savings, because sometimes you get in business with somebody that and it's hard to be hard on your friend when they need to be somebody to be hard on them, but it's also too many things can happen that can change that friendship into something other than friendship when money's involved. So I don't generally like to do that, but I certainly don't believe in the idea of taking advantage of friends. I've had friends do work at my house, and I've usually paid them more than what I would have paid if it was somebody else. And the whole idea is I don't want to take advantage of friendship. That people are saying, okay, well, the only reason he likes me is because I can do this or I can do that or I can do the other thing. I think that we need to be careful in our Christian relationships with people, because those people have to make money. They're in business to make money. Now, again, on the other hand, there's this giving and receiving. We have to be able to receive as well. But I'm saying our attitude should always be we want them to have a profit. That's their business. Letter D, the other thing that will help us is the blessing of God. If we understand that God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him, then we will understand that we don't have to compromise our principles of faith to receive His blessing. If all you're after is the blessing of God, then you don't have to worry about it. Because you're going to get God's blessing. You don't have to compromise your principles. There's no acceptable substitute for honesty, and there is no valid excuse for dishonesty when it comes down to that. Roman numeral 7, and we'll just take this real quickly. I know we're short on time here, but let's just take this section real quickly. Reestablishing your testimony. This section is for those who have not done well in the area of honesty in the workplace. If you are going to be God's representative in the workplace, it may mean reestablishing yourself as an honest person. Here are some steps in that process. Maybe you've not done well in this, and you need to kind of repent and change your behavior. At some point in time, not now because there's no time, I will tell you some of my own personal journey in this area, because I was dishonest in certain areas of work or certain areas of life. And I had to go back and do some of these very things, thinking I might even be thrown in jail. I could have been for some of the things that I did. And going back anyway and walking through the whole process. And believe me, you don't ever want to get back there again if you can certainly avoid it, which you can. Letter A, here's some things you do. First of all, acknowledge your failure before the Lord. You haven't just sinned against man, you've sinned against God. And the first step is always getting yourself right with God in relationship to these things. Letter B, abandon all excuses and the shifting of blame to others. Too often what we try to do to appease our conscience is create all the situations that made this thing happen, and usually it throws some responsibility on others. The truth of the matter is we did what we did, and there was no excuse for it. Letter C, apologize to anyone who is involved. And this requires a great deal of humility to sometimes tell people things they didn't know. And that's tough. That's hard. Letter D, accept the consequences of your actions. And sometimes you just have to accept the consequences. It's like, on a positive side, the apostles, they violated the law at times. When they told them not to preach anymore in the temple, they went ahead and preached. They violated the law, but they were willing to accept the consequences of their violation of the law, and they went to jail. And so they were willing to do that. They didn't fight jail. They didn't try to stone the ones that took them, which they could have, because the crowd was in their favor. And they could have riled up the crowd and got the soldiers stoned, but they didn't. They accepted the consequences of their behavior. Letter E, atone for or make restitution where necessary. Sometimes what you have to do is make a plan for repayment, make a plan for if you've taken things, if you've stolen things, getting people. Because, we've ripped off somebody in some of the things that we've done. Okay, what can we do to make up for this? And sometimes they won't say anything, but sometimes they will, and that's where we again have to be willing. Letter F, acquire other relationships that will help bring accountability to your life. Try to find partners that will partner together for honesty, partner together for integrity, and you can keep each other accountable in your own personal life, and that will help you a great deal. You can read that article when you're asked to violate your conscience. Obviously, it should give you some good insight into that whole particular area. All right, we'll close with that for